welcome to another episode of Finders Keepers, the podcast that helps you find the best keepers for your keeper and dynasty leagues. I'm your host Jordox, and round 23 of the AFL season was a whopper for the fantasy world with some huge scores. 21 players across the competition scored over 120 points, and that includes 3 players who went over 160 points, and amazingly, those 3 players were from the same team. The penultimate round of the season meant many of you were battling away in preliminary finals, and I hope you're on the right side of some of these big scores, and you're now preparing for the big one this week. For me, I did make the grand final in my home keeper league, and this week I'll be duking it out with the side that finished top in the hopes of securing my first premiership since 2021 and my second in this competition. To the footy itself, we had a couple of heart stoppers, with St Kilda holding off a very brave Bombers on Friday night, and then the top 4 clash between the Crows and the Magpies lived up to all expectations, with Adelaide prevailing in a tight finals-like contest. And after years and years and years of Collingwood just beating Adelaide, finally it was our turn, and it was bloody good. The rest of the round was fairly pedestrian, but we did see a very special record equalled in Tasmania on Sunday, but more on that later. In a moment I'll start to have a look at what I noticed across round 23 before looking at the waiver picks from last week and who you should be targeting if you're lucky enough to be in a grand final this week. And then we'll finish off with some of the most recent entries to the competition that Finders Keepers is running for a spot in a keeper league with me starting next year. An existing league is looking for a new coach to take over a team. And here at Finders Keepers, we've got a competition. All you have to do is go to the page on X, find the pinned tweet, retweet it, like it, and tell me the best, worst, or craziest trade you've ever seen in a keeper league. So I'll go through that at the end, and then I'll wrap up what is the second last episode of Finders Keepers for the season. Round 23. There was no Thursday night footy, which I think was good, but was kind of weird. I didn't know what to do with myself Thursday night. But we made up for that with the double header on Friday, and that started with Essendon and St Kilda. And we saw Andy McGrath continue his emergence as a midfielder who can score very well in fantasy. This was a big one. He put up a 134 after another week, heaps of centre bounces. And that's about 3-4 weeks now he's been in this role. And I think I've said a couple of times I could see a world where they stick with him as a midfielder because he just hasn't quite found that consistency in the back line. I wonder if next year they roll him out as a mid from the get-go. Mason Redmond's had 4 plus 90 scores out of his last 5, and he capped that off on Friday night with a 143 whopper, thanks to taking a stack of marks and being the main distributor back there. By his side though, young Angus Clark put up a 98 off half back. He took 10 marks on his way to that score, and he hasn't scored like that since his debut game. So just a nice little reminder of what this kid could be next year and beyond in the fantasy world. And it wouldn't be another round of footy without Essendon debuting yet another player. I think that takes them up to 15, which is well and truly a record for the non-expansion sides. And it'd be interesting to see how many players on their list haven't played this year. Probably just a handful. Anyway, this week it was Reece Unwin's turn, and he looked fantastic, I thought. He only scored a 42. I don't think he had a lot of ball in the second half, but everything I saw of him early in the game, he just had great awareness and great movement. He was ducking in and out of packs. Pretty exciting that the Bombers have found another one, I reckon. For the Saints, it was probably just Hugo Garcia, the only guy that really stood out to me. Put up his second ton in a row, thanks to, again, having a nice midfield role and putting up some big tackle numbers. Pretty bullish on Garcia moving forward. I think he can be a real goer in fantasy. Now, the other Friday night game was Freo and Brisbane, and this was a huge game with big ramifications, and Freo just couldn't kick straight, and the Lions got there pretty comfortably in the end, and Jasper Fletcher had a heck of a game. He scored a 141, taking 17 marks. Extraordinary. And just a great way to cap off his season, this breakout that he's had in this halfback role. Halfback with a bit of wing at times. I'm curious to see where he lands long term, but I think it's a good chance it'll be halfback more than wing. So the chance of him being a defender available player in the future, I reckon, is pretty strong. Zach Bailey had another game with extra midfield time in the absence of Lachie Neale and absolutely smashed it. He scored 124 thanks to 28 touches, 10 marks, kicked 2 goals too. I mean, geez, imagine if he locked away a midfield spot in the the next phase of his career. I don't know if it's going to happen. They're pretty full, that midfield, when everyone's playing, but geez, if you're a long-term owner of Zach Bailey, you'd be absolutely begging that they put him in the middle more often based on these scoring. Sam Marshall put up a 94. That's a great score in just his 6th game of AFL footy. Played on the wing, and I reckon he'll stay there at least this week because Jarrett Berry popped his shoulder. He's going to miss some weeks. So, pretty cool. I think we'll get another good look at Marshall this week against the Hawks. The early game on Saturday saw the Suns take on the Giants, and this was a bad result for Gold Coast. They dropped one at home. GWS, very impressive. So they'll make the last couple of games for the Suns a little bit more nervy in terms of trying to get that top 4 spot. Nothing really for the Suns other than Alex Davies getting suspended, so that opens up a spot at the centre bouncers. Does Braden Fiorini go back in? He's had almost nothing in the last few weeks. And for the Giants, I mean, Finn Callahan, 122. It just continues this marvellous second half of the year that he's had. And he's averaging 99 now, so he's getting very close to averaging the ton, which I think would just be a nice little reward for owners to say, yep, he got there. So he's got one more week. If he puts up a decent ton this week, he should average 100 for the season. Young Harry Rouston got a bit of a different role. He played more forward this week and looked okay. Kicked 4 goals, if you don't mind. Scored a 91. So it's really, for job security and that sort of thing moving forward, these kids that come in as mids have a bit of a taste, probably don't have the engine to just be permanent mids. If they can show their wares elsewhere on the ground, playing forward in this instance, it's really good for their job security and to develop in midfielders down the track. So 4 goals for him, and actually I just saw he got the Rising Star nomination for this round as well, which is pretty fitting. Carlton versus Port Adelaide, Saturday Arvo footy at Marvel. One-sided from the get-go here. The Blues, they found their mojo, didn't they? Pretty comfortable win. Now, Cooper Lord, this was disappointing. He was on track for another ton. He was on 54, but got hit by Ollie Wines. Not hit, bumped, and was eventually subbed off with concussion. Just such a shame, because he was really looking good, and I imagine he misses the last game of the year now, but certainly someone for next year, keep a very good eye on, and if you've got a list spot and he's available, I'd be stashing him for next year. Francis Evans has been in a nice run of form. Some friendly fixtures have helped. He's kicked goals in his last 4 games now for the Blues and put up an 80 in this one off the back of another couple of goals, I think it was. For Port Adelaide, Christian Moraes, he was the sub, But he put up a 49-point last quarter, taking him to a 71. It's pretty impressive. I mean, whenever you see a player put together a near on 50-point quarter, it does tell you a little bit about their future and what they could become. And I think he's done a lot right this year, Moraes. And with a new coach at Port next year, he's the sort of guy I'm going to be keeping a close eye on in the summer, and could be someone I try and snag in the pre-season draft. And lastly, Travis Boak, he put up a 97. That's 3 good scores in a row over 90. And he had a bit of an uptick in centre bounces this week as well. Ollie Wines is out, suspended. So I think Boak's going to get another good look at the midfield in what is going to be his farewell game this week. And with that forward status, well, it could be a handy guy to have in a grand final. I think they play Friday night too, so great loop option as well. Hawthorn and Melbourne played twilight footy on Saturday, and Hawks very comfortably won the game. Jack Gunston, can we talk about this guy for a minute? I mean, this is incredible what he's done this season. If you think about, certainly the way I saw Gunston, when he left Hawthorn to go to Brisbane for a year, we all thought his best was behind him. Then when he came back to Hawthorn, and I think he was the sub a lot last year with him and Bruce, I just did not see him having this season. He's averaging 76. He's kicked 60 goals for the year, sitting second in the Coleman. And on the weekend, I was against him in a single season draft prelim, and it was a nightmare. That first quarter, he just kept getting it and kicking goals. And then he never slowed down. He kept going, and I just was thinking, could someone just put someone on this guy? Anyway, he put up a 126, kicked 7 goals, 4. And I just think he deserves mention. What an incredible season, from a veteran. Connor McDonald put up a good score. I mean, owners would have been waiting for this performance all year. Hasn't quite gone on with it this year, McDonald, as maybe we thought he would this year. But on the weekend, 28 touches, 10 marks, a 116. That's more like it. And he'll just continue to get better into the next season. Jacob Van Ruin for Melbourne, I just wanted to give him a shout out. He's had a couple of good weeks now, and then in this game he put up an 84, which is really good. But when you break it down, he was on 24 at three-quarter time in this game. He had a 60-point last quarter. So I wasn't watching the game. I imagine maybe there was a little bit of junk time action, perhaps. I don't know, but that's incredible. So, that's a few good weeks in a row. He's put up good scores. Sure, it took a 60-point finish for him to get there, but I think he's tracking nicely. Saturday night, and the Crows and the Magpies, cracking game, as I said at the start. Lockie Murphy came back into the side, much to the chagrin of the very vocal Crows fans on X. I don't know why they hate this guy so much. Anyway, he came in and he did a roll on Josh Dacos. Now, he scored 19 himself, so he's obviously not an option for our sides, but just interesting to see him play a different role and do a lockdown. And he kept Dacos very quiet. So I think it's something the Crows will look at doing again. And just something to consider, I guess, if he becomes a permanent shutdown guy for the Crows. Dan Houston had a pretty good game in the context of, it's been a pretty underwhelming first season at Collingwood, certainly for the fantasy scoring side of things. In this game, he got moved up to the wing to get him a bit more involved, and I think it worked. The commentators said on the night it makes sense because he's got such a damaging boot. Having him up the ground and putting the ball inside 50 makes sense just to free him up and get him into the game. So I think we'll see a bit more of that. And then, look, for owners of him who aren't sure what the story is with his season and his scoring since coming to Collingwood, but I don't know, look at Lachie Schultz. He came to Collingwood the year before and he struggled a bit last year as well, and this year, when fit, he's had injuries. When fit, he's looked really good. Different player, but I guess the point is, sometimes when a player changes club, it can take over a year to get used to a new system and the upheaval of moving interstate and all that. So I don't know. I feel like Houston will bounce back next year. On to Sunday, and the early game was North Melbourne versus Richmond down in Tassie. And we saw something pretty special in this game. It was a close game, and then North kicked away in the second half for a comfortable win. But my goodness, Harry Sheezel with the highest score of the season, and not surprisingly, is this week's Finders Keepers Player of the Week. Have a listen to these numbers. 25 kicks, 29 handballs, 7 marks, 5 tackles, 2 goals too. He equals the all-time record of 54 possessions in a game, which matches the great Tom Mitchell from, I think, 6 years ago. So he scored a 186, which is the highest this year by fair whack. Last year we had a couple in the 180s. Jesse Hogan hit a 188 late in the year, and Zorko had a 184 as well. And to do it this week, it just would have decided so many prelims for draft, for keeper, for classic, whatever it may be. It was a weekend-defining score. And he wasn't alone for North. I can't remember any side doing this before, but North Melbourne had 3 players score over 160. I think I saw someone said 2011 when Geelong absolutely annihilated Melbourne. I think they had more than 3 go over 160. But anyway, it's remarkable. So Tristan Sherry, back from suspension, and just the cherry of last year was back, doing all his usual things, but laid 18 tackles on the way to 165. And then Luke Davies-Uniacke with a career high 40 disposals, and he scored 162. Yeah, crazy stuff. And I think that was the last game North are going to play down at Hobart. So, yeah, pretty fitting farewell. Over to Sydney and Geelong. This looked like a good game too. Geelong were pushed early and came back and won a very important game for them. For Sydney, it's just Peter Laddams. Did you jump on? It would have been very, very popular this week on the waivers as a one-hit wonder to replace Grundy as the sole ruck, and he rewarded those who jumped on handsomely with a 109. He was the highest scorer for Sydney, and yeah, it's almost a shame Grundy has to come back this week because, I've always thought Laddams could be a really good scorer and a decent ruck, but it's just never happened for him. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, not with Grundy in his way anyway. For Geelong, Sean Manor put up a 120, and he is finishing the year hot. He has a 5-round average of 109, and on the weekend, he saved his best for last. He put up 66 points in the last quarter on the way to, another great score for him. And he's proven to be more than a handy pickup. And, I think it continues this week with the Tigers. Geelong have Richmond this week. Shannon Neal stepped up. He kicked another 4 goals and scored 75. And, I think it was good signs because Jeremy Cameron was completely blanketed. Didn't kick a goal, didn't have much of it, and Neal stepped up, and I think that's going to be important for the Cats moving forward as, Jezza gets a bit older and they need the next one to step up. And I've talked about Neal a lot, very confident and excited for Geelong fans. I think he's going to be a gun. Now, Jack Bowes, I just... Can someone who knows tell me why Geelong continue to make him the sub? I just can't. I just don't understand it. He must be so frustrated that Like, let's just quickly look at his 2 games before this week. All right, 2 weeks ago against Port, 24 touches, 5 marks, kicked a couple of goals, scored a nice 101 in fantasy. Then the next week played the Bombers, 24 touches, 4 marks, 4 tackles, scored an 85. And then just out of nowhere, he's the sub again. I just don't understand it. He's been the sub, what's that, 1, 2, 3... Yeah, at least 3 times this year. And I just don't get it. He's 27. He's either got it or he doesn't. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's just really strange to me that they keep doing it to him. On to the last game of the round, the Bulldogs and the Eagles. And I thought after West Coast put up that great showing against the Crows last week, maybe this would be maybe it'd be a decent game to finish the round. But no, Bulldogs smashed them from the start, and he was nearly 100 points in the end. And did what they had to do, the Doggies. They've got to keep winning and winning well if they want to play in September. Bontempelli, I mean, just another masterclass. Another big score from him. So that's a 134. He's now the second highest averaging pure mid behind Jordan Dawson, averaging 110. Dawson's at 111. And he put on 56 points in the last quarter. You know, just when he could be forgiven for taking his foot off the pedal and maybe having a breather. The game was done. But no, he's a machine and he just can't be stopped. For West Coast, Brady Hoff, sort of as expected after last week, was used purely in defence again. And he's scored 50, which is obviously no good. I didn't watch. I wonder if he was more lockdown on, I think it was Riley West I saw. He might have been with him. So this lockdown role is going to kill his scoring, clearly. He's an interesting one, Hoff. I like him in the midfield. I like him off half back. But it's just until West Coast really decide what they're doing with him, it's a pretty hard guy to carry into the new year, I would have thought. A guy that's going to be fairly easy to carry into the new year, I would have thought, Tom McCarthy. Another solid scoring game in this really friendly midfield defender role. He attended 41% of centre bounces, but then took nearly 50% of the kick-ins, put up an 82. I think it's about what he's averaging. Fantastic debut season for a guy that only joined the team in the league halfway through the year. Campbell Chesser, another nice score playing off the wing. He's now gone 70, 70 and 80 since coming into the side. And I think this is a really good starting point to build on for 2026. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him a lot in the next year or two. And then lastly, Ryan Marrick, whose wing to half-back role that seems to yo-yo from week to week continues, because this week he was seemingly back to half-back and put up a 95, took kick-ins. But then the week before against the Crows, it looked like he was stuck on a wing. So, yeah, another guy who it would be helpful if we knew his role moving forward for us to decide whether we keep him next year. He won't have forward status, obviously, but should have defender status and has shown that he can score really well when in the right role. And that was round 23, the things I noticed. And, you know, there's not a lot at this point of the year. There's one game to go in our season. And then, you know, we start looking at all the off-season stuff for keeper leagues. So let's have a look at the waivers that I put up last week, players I suggested, see how they went on the weekend, and then we'll look at some names for this week that can hopefully help you win your grand final. So last week, I went back to the well with Neil Erasmus. I keep going back to this guy. I was really bullish 7 days ago because it was a different role. He was on the wing and I think he scored 95 and he'd had the highest time on ground he'd ever had. Anyway, I was optimistic, but didn't really happen. Just put up a 48 against the Lions this week. I mean, most of the Dockers scored pretty low on the weekend anyway. I'm still not sure on Erasmus. He's a real curious one. And yeah, he's probably one that if you hear any more whispers from here to when the deadline's in your league that he might be off to a new club, that's when I'd be really interested. I reckon a new club would do him the world of good, and I still think he can be a fantasy jet. One of the other guys I put up was Hugh Boxall for St Kilda. He was just at 52% owned, sits at 56% now. He scored a 66, playing that similar role he's had the last few weeks on the wing. And what was pleasing was he only laid one tackle, which isn't great, after going 8 and 8 in the weeks before. But he was still able to put up a similar score even without the bulk tackles, which just shows he's got a reasonable ability to find the ball as well as laying heaps of tackles. Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty good in the years to come. And look forward to seeing him next year again. Peter Laddams, well, this time last week, he was at 22% ownership. That's now up at 47%, as many would have jumped on for the 1 week ride. Got the 109 score, which was great. But with Grundy back this week, I'm really interested to see his ownership in 7 days. If everyone just jumps back off, or if they think, nah, maybe he showed enough and he could be a second ruck alongside Grundy. And then Lockie Cowan I put up as well. I just couldn't believe he was only at 58% ownership last week. He's now at 63%, but yeah, I'm still surprised at the 27% of leagues that haven't rostered this guy. He put up an 89, and he's just looking better and better with every week that passes. And that was it. Just before I move on to this week, I like to go deeper and look at real deep leagues and very low owned players. But I don't usually come back the next week and talk about how they went. I'm just going to do it this time just because I was a bit excited with some of their scores. Jacob Van Ruin was someone I mentioned last week, and he put up an 84 thanks to that whopping 60-point last quarter. Oscar Baker for the Dogs, he put up 52, nothing exciting there. But Francis Evans was at 1% ownership last week. He's now up to 4%. So a few people are starting to catch on. Scored an 80. And he's had a good couple of weeks and plays Essendon this week. And it's an early game, Thursday night, Friday. Oh, yeah, it could be Thursday night. Opportunity to loop him and maybe get another 80 out of him, which would be pretty good. All right, this week I'll throw some names at you that might be able to help you in your grand final if you're in one this week. Actually, one of the guys I've just seen has been suspended, so I won't bother with him. That was Shannon Neal, 66% owned, played the Tigers this week, but he's been suspended, I just saw before. The other names, though, let's go. Angus Clark at 51% ownership, put up that 98 in that nice rebounding role for the Bombers. They don't have a lot of soldiers back there. Mason Redman, he put up a whopper. Clark put up his 98. I reckon he could do similar this week and potentially be a guy that you hang on to next year. Dylan Shield is still only owned by 73%. He was suspended last week. You'd think comes in, plays midfield, maybe could give us a nice 90 plus to finish what I think some are expecting to be his career, at least at Essendon. Jack Martin, surprisingly, sits at 65% ownership. And I get that he's not appealing from a long-term perspective, but man, he's been fantastic this year. And, you know, he's not playing off half-back like he was a while ago, maybe a month ago. He's just playing forward now. But, you know, what did he get on the weekend? 88. And he's playing Richmond this week. Good chance for a nice final score for him for the season. And then the last guy, Isaac Cumming for Adelaide. I reckon he would have been very highly owned earlier in the year, and as the years rolled on, people have, grown weary of his poor scoring and his very unfriendly wing role. But the last 2 weeks, 89 and 95 he's put up, and just watching him, he's just looked like he's gone to another level, and they're using him a lot more, and he's a lot more involved. He's at 66% ownership. Crows have North Melbourne down at Marvel. Could be an opportunity for another nice score to finish the year. Now, going a bit deeper this week, I didn't find much. I've just got the one name sitting at 13% ownership is Bo McCreary. He returned for the Pies on the weekend after a few weeks out. And if you remember his game before he went out with his injury, he put up a really big score on the back of a very high tackle tally. But he was playing bits and pieces in the midfield, and I liked the look of him Saturday night again, just giving them a bit of a burst out of the guts, and put up a 73 on the weekend, has the forward status. I reckon he plays midfield again this week at times. Could put up a decent score against Melbourne on Friday night. So they're my picks this week. I hope I've helped you find someone that can take you to premiership glory this weekend. But for those not contending, and depending on how the rules work in your league, this could be your last opportunity to pick up a free agent before it all closes down for the summer. So this is a great time for you to start to look at your list and work out, get a rough idea of who's on the chopping block, and then if there's anyone in the pool that you got a feeling about that you might want to have a look at, it's not a bad time to just go shopping and grab one or two of these guys. And it depends when you delist. Like my leagues, we delist in October quite early. I think most do it in the new year. So you can grab a bunch of players now, sit on them for the summer, see what the training reports are, see what their role could be in 2026, and then make a call on dropping them or not. So if you're out of the contention, if you just lost a prelim and you're bummed, keep an eye on the free agent list. Don't use a waiver wire necessarily, but just before it all closes this weekend, if there's anyone you've been thinking about that's on your mind and he's sitting there, go grab him now, because if you don't, he has a big summer and you have to use a high draft pick to get him. Well, you'll be wishing you took the advice that I just gave. All right, let's finish up with some of the entrants rather, to the competition that I'm running here on Finders Keepers, with the prize being a spot in a keeper league that I'm currently in. It's a 12-team league. One of the coaches has left, so we have a team waiting for a new coach to come in, take the reins, and get this team looking sharp again. I've posted the squad, so the players in the team, as well as some info and rules and how the league works. Put that up on the X page, Finders Keepers X page, which is at FindKeepAFL. And if you are interested, all you have to do is like and retweet the pinned tweet on the Finders Keepers X page and simply tell me the best, worst, or craziest trade you've ever seen in a keeper league. So let's have a look at some of the entries from this week. The first one comes from at Andrew Domahidi1, who's just put quite simply, my best trade is Callum Mills to Colby McKercher. And that is a fantastic trade. So I don't know the details of when you pulled that off. Perhaps you did that earlier this year when McKercher wasn't in a very friendly role and Callum Mills was on the way back. I'm not sure, but that's an absolute steal, Andrew. And I think you're going to be very pleased with that one well into the future. Thanks for putting that one in. The next one comes from at AFL Dream Teamer, and his goes like this. Traded Zorko for Callahan at the end of last season. The guy that got Zorko won the flag, and I got another piece to rebuild the squad. Well, AFL Dream Teamer, that is the definition of win-win trading, isn't it? The other guy gets, Zorko, he's going on again next year, I'm pretty sure. But he gets a premiership, another good couple of years out of Zorko, and then you get Finn Callaghan. And this was at the end of last season, so you would be absolutely stoked with the season Callaghan's had. He's really broken out, and that is a fantastic trade that, both coaches would be very happy with. Love it. Thanks for putting that one through, mate. I like it. And then the last one for today, we'll look at Daniel Ramage 9. And he puts this one in, and I like this one a lot. 2021, and a team traded their first round pick for a depth ruck and a third rounder. They ended up coming last, and the coach with the number 1 pick grabbed Nick Dacos. A reminder to all to be cautious with how you trade your first rounders. All right, so someone's put up their first round pick, probably not expecting to finish last, and then for whatever reason they have come last. They don't have pick 1, and that just happens to be the year that Nick Dacos arrives. Oh man, that's brutal. I'd love to know who that depth ruck was and who he used the third rounder on. If you can find that out, going back a few years. I don't think it matters. It could be anyone, and you'd still wish you kept pick 1 and got Dacos. That's a good one. Painful, but yeah, a good reminder. Just be careful with those first rounders and be very aware of who's going to be in the draft in the next year. Because, with Dacos, it wasn't a surprise. It was the same year we had Horne-Francis as well. We knew they were going to be good. Love it, Daniel. That's a great one. Thanks for sending that through. And that's it for this week, I reckon. Pretty short and sharp episode this week. Get to that time of the year where there's a lot less to discuss in the long term. It's more just about, it's just about this weekend now, isn't it? For those that have made the granny. So to everyone listening who's in a grand final this week, whether it's in keeper, whether it's single season draft, whether it's in the classic format, good luck. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the weekend. It'll be nervy. It'll be exhausting. But hopefully you come out the other side a premiership winner. And if you don't, you should be proud of getting there. They're hard to get into and even harder to win. So I'll be back next week for the final episode of Finders Keepers for the season to review the grand final week that was round 24. And I'll be announcing the winner of the competition to see who's getting a spot in the league with me next year. So look forward to that. Thank you so much for listening. For those who've listened all year, thank you so much. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you've given it a good old like and subscribe wherever you're listening. And I look forward to bringing you the big one next week. So stay tuned for that. Same time next week on the Tuesday. And as always, make sure you've liked the X page at FindKeepAFL to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the podcast. That's it for me. Thanks again. Talk to you next week. In the meantime, I'm Jordox. This has been Finders Keepers. And until next time, keep on keeping on.